Three Nations War Delaware Iroquois League Epic Battle. Welcome to Native Legends and History Stories. Subscribe now for weekly tales of forgotten battles that shaped America. Today, we uncover the epic clash between three mighty nations, the Delaware, the League, and the Iroquois. Long before European contact, the Western Territories thundered with the footsteps of 40 Delaware tribes, the Lenni Lenape, the original people. Each tribe commanded hundreds of warriors, their hunting parties and families stretching across the land like living rivers. Their arsenal included war clubs marked with distinct tribal symbols, spears tipped with flint and bone, and bows crafted from the strongest hardwoods. These weren't simple nomads, but a sophisticated nation with complex military and social structures. As they pushed eastward, Delaware scouts discovered something extraordinary. At the Mississippi River, the Mangwe people, known today as the Iroquois, had already claimed the northern reaches. But it was what lay beyond the river that truly captured their attention. Rising from the eastern bank stood massive fortifications unlike anything seen before. The Allegheny, a tribe of warriors, renowned for their exceptional height and strength, had built a network of defensive strongholds that would challenge modern engineering. These weren't mere dirt mounds. Theological fortifications featured earth and walls rising 20 feet high, reinforced with timber and stone. Watchtowers dotted the perimeter, allowing sentries to spot approaching forces from miles away. Within these walls, towns housed thousands of warriors, their weapons workshops producing distinctive stone-tipped spears and massive war clubs suited to their giant frames. Archaeological evidence of these structures still stands today, testament to their builders' skill. The Delaware, following diplomatic tradition, sent their most respected peace chiefs to negotiate passage. The Allegheny rulers, towering above their visitors in councils held within their fortified towns, granted what seemed a reasonable request. The Delaware could cross the Mississippi and pass through Allegheny territory to reach eastern lands. But the Allegheny harbored darker intentions. As thousands of Delaware people struggled across the mighty river, warriors swimming alongside rafts carrying elders, women balancing children and vital supplies, hunters protecting their precious weapons from the water, the Algonquins watched and waited. The crossing point had been carefully chosen. The eastern bank offered no cover, no defensive position, no escape route. When nearly half the Delaware nation had reached the eastern shore, exhausted from battling the river's current, the Allegheny-struck warriors poured from hidden gates. In their earthen walls, their war cries echoing across the water. Armed with spears and clubs scaled to their massive size, they fell upon the defenseless travelers. Delaware warriors scrambled to form defensive lines, but their weapons were waterlogged, their formations scattered, their people exposed. The massacre drew the attention of the Mang, who had experienced their own conflicts with the Algue. Their chiefs quickly recognized an opportunity. Delaware courage and Mangwe military prowess could together challenge the Algonquins' seemingly impregnable fortifications. They approached the Delaware leaders with a proposal that would forever alter the balance of power. East of the Mississippi, combine their forces, defeat the Allegheny, and share the conquered territories. The Delaware, their dead still unburied on the eastern bank, their warriors burning for vengeance, saw the wisdom in this alliance. Two nations, each bringing unique military strengths. The Delaware's superior numbers and proven battle tactics, the Mang's expertise in siege warfare and forest combat would unite against a common enemy. Their combined forces would soon test the mighty walls that had protected the Allegheny for generations. The war that began would mark a turning point in the eastern territories. Season after season, the alliance of Delaware and Mingo warriors laid siege to Allegheny strongholds. Each battle left deeper scars across the land. Allegheny walls, testament to generations of engineering skill, trembled under the weight of constant assault. War cries echoed through valleys where peace had reigned for centuries. Delaware archers launched volleys that blackened the sky, while Mangwe warriors battered the walls with trees turned to rams. The League fought back with terrifying might, their giant warriors swinging war clubs that could sweep entire lines of attackers off their feet, hurling spears that pierced shield and flesh alike. But even their extraordinary strength couldn't stem the relentless tide of attackers. The mighty fortresses began to fall. First the southern walls crumbled. Then the central stronghold succumbed to hunger and exhaustion. The northern citadel, though protected by steep cliffs and rushing rivers, eventually fell to a bold assault during a raging storm. Delaware warriors scaling the wet rocks, while Mang forces engaged the defenders at the main gate. When the last battle ended, the surviving Algonquins gathered their remaining people. They crossed the Mississippi River in a procession that marked the end of an era. Warriors who once dominated the eastern territories now walked with heads bowed, their women cradling children born during sieges, their elders clutching sacred objects saved from their fallen temples. The western shore swallowed them into history. Never again would they return to their ancestral lands. The victorious allies divided their conquest. The Mang claimed the territories bordering the Great Lakes, establishing settlements along the pristine shoreline. Their hunters built camps in strategic locations, each positioned to guard against any threat from the west. The Delaware nations spread southward into rich valleys and forests, their hunting parties ranging across vast expanses of newly won territory. In the year 1698, the Shawnee people, under the leadership of Chief Opessa, approached the colonial authorities. They sought permission to settle along the strategic waterways of Conestoga and Pequea Creeks. The government granted their request, recognizing the advantage of having a buffer between competing tribal interests. The Shawnee proved to be the most restless of all tribes. By 1728, they had pushed westward to the Ohio River, establishing new settlements along its fertile banks. The entire nation gradually shifted to these western territories, though many of their warriors maintained camps in the east. During the French and Indian War, these eastern Shawnee joined forces with Delaware raiders, launching attacks against colonial settlements that had sprung up on their former lands. The Mang maintained constant vigilance. Along the Great Lakes, there were canoes ready to launch at any sign of threat. Their scouts watched the western horizon, still haunted by memories of the Allegheny giants. As their numbers grew, they expanded northward along the St. Lawrence River, their territory pressing against Delaware land like storm clouds gathering before rain. The bonds of alliance weathered and cracked. Delaware leaders watched Mangway expansion with growing unease, while Mangway councils whispered of Delaware strength with increasing fear. Where once they had shared hunting grounds and council fires, now they shared only suspicion and carefully marked boundaries. The peace forged in their war against the Allegheny giants began to crumble, threatening to shatter at the smallest spark. Fear gnawed at the hearts of Mangway leaders. In shadowed council meetings, they crafted a plan dark as moonless night. Rather than face Delaware's strength directly, they would turn other tribes' weapons against their feared enemies. Under cover of darkness, Mangway warriors slipped across tribal boundaries. Their footsteps whispered through sleeping villages, their blades finding unsuspecting victims. Each kill was carefully staged. War clubs bearing other tribes' sacred marks left prominently beside cooling bodies. These weapons spoke their own silent language, each tribe's unique symbols carved into the wood. Serving as signatures of guilt, the Delaware hunters never saw death coming. Dawn painted the sky red as Mangway raiders struck their camps. The crack of breaking branches was the only warning. Before arrows found their marks, bodies fell beside still smoldering fires, morning stew bubbling untasted in cooking pots. The raiders vanished like morning mist, taking supplies and weapons, but leaving false evidence behind. War clubs marked with rival tribe symbols dropped deliberately at the scene. But it was in Cherokee territory that the Mangway played their deadliest game. They executed a perfect murder, every detail planned to ignite tribal fury. Beside the victim, they placed their master stroke, a war club bearing Delaware tribal marks, each pattern precise, each symbol a carefully crafted lie. The Cherokee discovery of their dead kinsmen lit a spark that would soon engulf nations in flames. Cherokee war parties exploded from their villages, faces masked with black paint, weapons gleaming in the dawn light. They fell upon Delaware settlements like summer lightning striking without warning or mercy. Delaware blood soaked into soil that had known peace for generations. A war began that would stain the land red for years to come. When truth finally emerged from shadow, the Delawares' fury burned hotter than any council fire. Tales of Mangwe treachery spread through their camps like wildfire, fanned by revelations of their enemies' worst nature. The Moravian missionaries recorded Delaware elders speaking of Mangwe practices, with voices shaking in disgust, especially their habit of consuming human flesh, which placed them below beasts. In Delaware eyes, the scattered nature of Mangwe governance had allowed such atrocities to flourish. Each tribe answered only to its own chief, leaving the nation powerless to control its most savage members. Yet they bore collective guilt for these blood-soaked deceptions. The Delaware vowed to erase them from the earth, their warriors sharpening weapons while speaking oaths of extermination. Faced with this existential threat, the Mangwe found salvation in unity. From their desperate councils rose the voice of Thanawage, an aged Mohawk chief whose wisdom had been earned through decades of war and peace under his guidance. 5 proud nations, Mohawk, Oneida, Onandigo, Cayuga, and Seneca, forged an alliance strong as ironwood. Their combined strength would stand against both Delaware vengeance and French expansion from the north. The Confederation grew stronger in 1712 when the Tuscaroras joined, fleeing north after their failed uprising against white settlers in North Carolina. Now 6 nations stood as one, their warriors learning to use Dutch firearms with deadly skill. This new unity allowed them to check Delaware advances, while simultaneously resisting French attempts to claim the vast territories between the Atlantic and Mississippi. The legacy of these blood feuds and alliances carved itself into the continent's history. As permanent as the symbols each tribe carved into their war clubs, the weapons that once served as tools of deception became silent witnesses to an era when treachery reshaped the balance of power among the eastern nations. Pressed between French bayonets and Delaware arrows, the Iroquois devised their most cunning strategy yet. Among all tribes, women alone held the sacred power of peacemaking. While warriors' pride demanded they fight to the last drop of blood, women's voices could halt even the fiercest battles. In council lodges across the territories, women would rise when bloodshed had gone too far. Their voices carried the weight of life itself. "Look at your hands, brave warrior," they would say. "Those fingers that grip weapons so tightly once clutched your mother's dress. That mouth that screams war cries once suckled at a mother's breast." The women's words struck deeper than any arrow. They spoke of empty cradles and cold hearths, of mothers who bore sons only to feed them to war's endless hunger. Each warrior who falls, they reminded the fighting men, once kicked within his mother's womb. Each corpse on the battlefield once brought joy with his first steps. Must we bear daughters only to see them weep over dead husbands? Must we raise sons only to lay them in early graves? When hatred burned hottest, women moved between warring camps like spirits of mercy. They carried not weapons but memories. That brave you seek to kill, did his mother not share her corn with your sister during the Great Famine? That warrior whose scalp you hunt, did he not pull your child from the river's floods to summers past? Under their gentle but firm guidance, enemies would lay down weapons, share the peace pipe, and remember their common humanity. The Mangwe seized upon this sacred tradition with serpent's cunning. Their chiefs approached the Delaware with hunted words. "The Indian nations bleed from endless wars. We need a great people, strong and respected, to assume the woman's peacemaking role. Not some weak tribe whose voice carries no weight, but you mighty Delaware, whose wisdom all nations heed." The offer dripped with sweet poison, to be peacemakers to save future generations from war's ravages. What glory could be greater? The Delaware, their confidence swollen by victory, saw no trap in these soft words. In 1617, before Dutch witnesses at Albany, they accepted their new role with great ceremony. The transformation ritual became a grand spectacle. Delaware warriors laid aside their weapons, accepting the symbolic petticoat of peacemaking. Songs of celebration filled the air, but beneath the drums beat a darker rhythm. The Mang's hearts pounding with triumph at their own cleverness. For the Delaware had walked willingly into his snare. The role of peacemaker carried a hidden price. Those who spoke for peace could not raise weapons in war. By accepting the petticoat, the Delaware had effectively disarmed themselves. The Mangwe architects of this masterful deception promptly assumed the role of protectors over their former enemies. In years to come, Delaware elders would bitterly accuse the Dutch of conspiring in this elaborate trap. The same European traders who had witnessed their elevation to peacemakers stood by as the Mangwe transformed protection into domination. The Delaware, mighty nation that had struck terror into the Algonquin giants, found themselves bound by silken cords of their own acceptance. The Mangs' hunger for dominance knew no bounds. Once again they wove a web of deception, whispering promises of alliance to the Delaware while secretly plotting with the Cherokee. "We will fight beside you," they proclaimed, leading Delaware warriors straight into a Cherokee ambush. When blood stained the ground, the Mangwe warriors vanished like smoke. The Delaware finally saw through their enemies' schemes. Rage burned in their hearts as they counted their dead. Their numbers still outmatched the Mangwe. They could crush these betrayers, wipe them from memory, but fate had played its final cruel trick. European settlers now poured into their lands like an endless tide, forcing the mighty Delaware to turn their attention from vengeance to survival. The Mangs spun their own version of history, claiming military victory over the Delaware. Though they could never explain how this supposed conquest happened, some argued it seemed more logical than believing a powerful nation would surrender to mere trickery. Their imagined triumph brought real rewards. They claimed ownership of Delaware lands, their hunting parties roaming at will through their former enemies' territory. Yet the Delaware spirit refused to break. In 1756, Chief NEWSCOP stood tall before the Iroquois Council. His warrior strength and his people's determination forced the Mangwe to acknowledge Delaware independence. Though the Mangwe would later try to reassert dominance, that moment marked the Delawares'